I have a friend who says, don't get down on your past. Make it a bestseller. With TV shows specializing in self-revelation of the most sordid kind, it's easy to believe what my friend says. What is fascinating is that the majority of these revelations are about the misuse of sex in our sexuality. As a nation, we're fascinated by sex, especially people's failures with sex. Lust is very much alive and is always a bestseller. It's also true that what was once considered sinful and private is now openly discussed and shown on family television. Over the last few decades, there's been a shift in our acceptance or at least tolerance of some sexual misdemeanors. There was a time when lust referred to sinful indulgence of the sexual drive. This meant for Catholics that any sexual thought or action outside of marriage was a mortal sin. Today, many realize that many of these thoughts and actions are part of adolescence, part of coming to terms with one's sexuality, becoming a loving adult. Many would also say that there was an exaggerated view of sexual sin. It became the sin, and many Catholics lost perspective on the broader reality of sin in our lives and the world. Bad thoughts, impure actions were at the top of the list when going to confession. Our social responsibilities, our sins of omission, or our lack of care for the environment would rarely be mentioned. While today sins against chastity are seen by many in a different light from the past, we can all too easily ignore that they continue to be destructive and hurtful abuses of sexuality. As the great psychiatrist Carl Menninger said, certainly not all sex is bad, but there is such a thing as bad sexual behavior. The reason it is bad is because of what it does to those who indulge in such behaviors. Bad sexual behavior can destroy oneself and others. We can think of sexual abuse, incest, and rape, and how these destroy people as the perpetrators use their sexuality to gain a sense of power over another. It's sad to think how many people in a position of trust, such as clergy, teachers, and other professionals, have abused their role to achieve their own selfish ends. In the process, they've wreaked untold damage on the victims and destroyed their own soul. There are other victims of bad sexual behavior that are more indirectly affected. I'm thinking of those in the sex trade and in pornographic films. We rarely think of these people whose lives are ruined by the lust of others. Pornography is big business and preys on our lust. It is based on illusion and lies. Today, the biggest site for pornography is the internet. It easily seduces the curious and captures the imagination of those who are unsure of their sexuality, who are without a secure object for their love. No longer do people have to go to squalid theaters and risk exposure. They can fill their imaginations with fantasies in the privacy of their own room. However, the easy access to pornography makes it especially dangerous because it can so easily become addictive. One of the realities in our world is the highly sexualized environment in which we live. Exposure to sexual stimuli is everywhere, so it's not surprising that young people who are entering into sexual awareness are enticed into sexual encounters. The age of first sexual intercourse keeps dropping and the fallout is increasing. There's the increased risk of cervical cancer, unwanted pregnancies, abortions, to name a few. But even more insidious are the psychological after effects from the lies and promises that are never followed through. People end up feeling used and having to deal with their rage and rejection. Young people will say they're in love, but forget that sexual expression is never an indifferent activity, especially for women. When someone gives their heart away, the potential for hurt is enormous. And this is especially true when people are involved sexually. Can there really just be casual sex? I doubt it. Because sexual intercourse is much more than just a physical reality. It may be lust at the beginning, but it quickly develops into an expectation for more. What we need as adults are stable relationships of love, and there is nothing as empty as casual encounters that are a temporary band-aid for loneliness or a callous use of another. The most common headline we see in the gossip papers and magazines seems to be about adultery. Movie stars, sports heroes, and politicians seem to be the favorite sinners to throw stones at. Maybe there's some consolation in knowing that others are sinners too, and that lessens our guilt. However, adultery is often a too common adult sin and has devastating consequences. Adultery is less about sex than about a violation of trust and integrity. Infidelity to one's marriage vow means one is disloyal not only to one's partner, but to family and trusting friends. Think of what happens to children caught in the midst of a parent's disloyalty. This is why it's a capital sin. Adultery undermines trust. Can a partner ever trust an unfaithful spouse again? Adultery breaks hearts that are not easily mended. Fidelity cannot be taken for granted. It's not something that comes without effort, but takes consistent rededication. In closing, we can say that sex is God's greatest gift to us as humans. It draws us out of ourselves towards another. It cements relationships. It brings new life to our world. We give thanks for this wonderful gift and pray that we may always use it as God intended, responsibly.